Good morning. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our Financial Fraud Prevention and Trends webinar, developed and presented by First National Security Manager, James Estes. As we'll hear about today, financial fraud is an incredibly important and relevant topic to Alaska's businesses, which is why I'm glad we're able to bring James in to discuss it today as part of our Workshop Wednesday series. My name is Jacob Wilson. I'm a business support manager in the marketing department at First National, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Before we turn it over to James, I would like to encourage everyone to engage with us as much as possible throughout the presentation. You can submit your questions if you're on Zoom using the question and answer feature at the bottom of the screen, or if you're watching us on Facebook Live, please just comment with your questions. We'll be monitoring both those channels and we'll answer them during the 2 question and answer series that we have, one halfway through James's presentation and the other at the end. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out during the presentation, please consider reaching out afterwards to a member of our team if you have any questions on fraud or any of the other information that James covers today. So, without further ado, I'm happy to turn it over to First National Security Manager, James Estes. James, welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Today, we're going to be talking about an ever-increasing topic, fraud. Again, my name's James Estes. I'm the security manager here at First National Bank Alaska. I've been with the bank for 3 years. Prior to that, I served almost 21 years in law enforcement between the Alaska Troopers and the Anchorage Police Department. And here in a second, I believe Jacob is going to put up the PowerPoint so we can begin. Jacob, are you able to put the PowerPoint up?
Yes, definitely, James. Give me one moment. Actually, I thought you were putting up the PowerPoint, so I can share my screen. One moment. All right, let me get started on this. Pulling this up. Sorry about the brief interruption here. Let's go. One moment. James, can you see my screen?
Are you able to make me the presenter?
Yes, you are currently good to go as a presenter.
Oh, okay. So again, apologize for the technical difficulties. Again, my name is James Estes, the security manager here at Fnba, and we are going to be talking about fraud and the what we're seeing here in Alaska. Let's see, it is not letting me work, or is not working. So give me a second, see what I can do.
James, I can control the slides for you if you just want to let me know and go to the next one.
Okay, go ahead to the next.
Okay.
And so the first question is, and you can answer directly on, through the app is, but do you personally know somebody, either a business or individual who has been victim of some type of fraud in the past 2 years? Most of you all are probably going to respond and say, yes, it's a growing trend that has increased dramatically over the past couple of years. Okay, go ahead to the next. To give you a little bit of background about fraud actually dates back to 300 BC. One of the first instances of fraud was back over in Greece area, where two merchants, sailors, had taken out life or insurance on products that they were going to sell, and at the conclusion of they arrived to the port, sold their goods. Once they sold their goods, collected their money, they then took their ship out, sunk it in the middle of the sea, and reported as a loss. They were found out to be that it was fraud indeed. And back then, it wasn't too kosher to do that type of stuff back then, and ultimately they paid the price for committing fraud. But that's where one of the first instances had occurred and referenced fraud. But since then, fraud has grown, the technology, the advancements, and these are some of the things that have come about. We have advanced fee, business email compromise, charity, counterfeit, credit card, cryptocurrency, debt collection, employment, fake invoice, family, friend, emergency, home improvement, identity theft, investment, moving, Nigeria scam, online purchasing, phishing, rental, romance, sweepstakes, and tech support and travel. Those are just some of the ones that have come about recently since the evolution of fraud back in 300 BC. Since the 2021, there were reported 250,000 cases. Over the next year, that had increased 84%. So there's been an 84% increase of just check fraud alone. So those of you who have business accounts, even personal accounts, the likelihood that you or somebody that you know will be a victim of some type of check fraud is growing rapidly. 84% is a huge increase when it comes to just the statistics. And it is not slowing down. I can tell you that this year alone, my office has seen a drastic increase on businesses reporting being victims of fraud. And in addition to that, I've talked with other financial institutions who mirror the same concerns as us as far as the increase of fraudulent activity when it comes to check fraud. So some of the topics we're going to talk about today are counterfeit checks, altered checks, check washing, stolen forged checks, spoofing emails, and prevention. So two rules to remember if you're a business owner is rule one, having a customer friendly but offender hostile surrounding will help keep fraud from impacting the bottom line. And what that is in reference to is we want to make sure that our businesses, we're inviting people, that it's a friendly atmosphere, but we want to also make sure that it is something that will deter people to come to our business to commit crime. And one of the simplest ways, if you're a business owner, that can help in this avenue is a simple word, hello. And reference that is, if you all have a business front where you have customers coming in and you want to make sure that your receptionist, your front counter person, your salespeople, when people enter the business, that you are greeting them, saying hello. You're using a dialogue, you're setting the tone to say, look, I'm aware that you're coming into our business. Not only am I aware, I'm greeting you, I'm looking at you, and I will be able to assess based off your reaction, what is partially maybe some of your intent to be there. So that's one thing that we can do when we talk about making sure that we have a vendor hostile surrounding is not to be hostile, but make it to where when people come to our business, they are aware that we are acknowledge that they're there. Not only that is to make sure that the space that you have is clean, not cluttered, possibly having video cameras up, those simple things can deter people from coming to your location to commit crime. And rule number 2 is employee training done right and doing business with customers and companies and trust will help prevent your business from becoming a victim of fraud. So we want to make sure that I'm seeing a screen. So we want to make sure that when you train and do onboarding with your customers, that they are trained correctly, that they are doing the things and the practices that you set in place to help prevent your victim from being victims of fraud. Some of those things is being training is if somebody gets an email that they're not aware of, have them look at it, assess it. Does it make sense why I'm getting this email? And we'll talk a little bit more about email compromises and things that happen via email, is having them assess the situation is, does the request make sense? Okay, next slide. The question is not if you're going to be a victim, but when and how much will you lose when it happens to you? Fraud is on the rise. According to the Federal Trade Commission, consumers reported losing more than $5.8 billion to fraud in 2021. And that was an increase of 70% over the prior year. And as you all can look back or remember back on this slide, I think it was the fourth slide, talking about how just from 2020 over 2022, that there was a 70% increase in check fraud. So that number's probably grown tremendously. Almost 2.8 million customers filed a fraud report with the FTC. These numbers don't include the 1.4 million reports of identity theft and 1.5 million of other miscellaneous reports. And one of the things, the trend is that when we look at these numbers as a whole, when we break it down, it's averaging out to about $1,000 per person who's a victim. Now, some of those victims are out tens of thousands of dollars, while others are out only a couple hundred. But when you average everything together, check fraud is about $1,000. And the previous article where I listed all the different type of scams that are out there, those also statistically break down to about $1,000 per person is what the average American is out when it comes down to fraud. The culture of fraud is clearly shifting. The pandemic has created so many more points of vulnerabilities for families and businesses. Prior to COVID, the suspects were not directly engaged with all the fraud that you are currently seeing. You are seeing to where it used to be you would get a random email or you would get some letter in the mail, something to say you have won the Publishers Clearinghouse. The Nigerian scam is that you're related to this long lost prince and there's millions of bucks. The fraudsters are getting better and more sophisticated. They are starting to be more involved in the crime of actually calling you and over the phone. And with the advancement of artificial intelligence, that's only going to continue to grow. Alaska fraud trends is one of the big things that we're seeing is counterfeited business checks, corporate takeover accounts, stolen checks. credit card fraud, email compromise, and check washing. Um, prior to me starting here at the bank, I would write checks occasionally. Now that I've been here for 3 years, I can't remember the last time I wrote a check because the vulnerability of checks and the trends that are going out there. I know that you all as businesses, that's something that you have to do, and we're going to talk about some of the safeguardings that that you can put in place that will help mitigate the risk. But just be aware that um, there are vulnerabilities for any type of banking product, whether across the board. The best thing and the easiest solution out there, I can tell you all, is to make sure that you are checking your accounts on a daily basis to make sure, hey, is there anything out of the unusual? Is there something there that doesn't make sense? You being personally involved and engaged in the your accounts will help detect things. The sooner that you learn of it, the faster you report it to us, the better off we are to help you reduce the loss. Good. Counterfeiting. Fraudsters create checks using information from intercepted checks, and all they need are simple three little things. They need a laptop, they need a printer, and they need check stock that they can get here locally. They do mail rips. They go to, at the night, they go to drive around, or even during the daytime now, they're driving around. Um, they are stealing mail. They are then going back to their car or hotel. They're deciphering what information they can get out of there. They are capturing checks the best they can with the account numbers. The person making the checks aren't necessarily the people that are doing the fraud. As far as going into the bank, what they're doing is then they're going to the street and saying, hey, can you cash this item? And if so, they'll give them a $500 check, have them go into the local bank or a check cashing place, and give them a couple $100 for their time. So it's not a sophisticated type of crime. It's readily available. It's something that easily can be done. Okay, next. So counterfeiting, when you all look at checks, if you're a business and you receive checks, and one of the things that we train is look to see, does the check make sense? If you're a business and you get a check and it's referenced Google in-app settlement program in Larkspur, Alaska, is there first, there's no Larkspur, Alaska, does it make sense to get a check from Google in-app settlement program, especially for this amount? Does the information make sense? And if not, you should question it because people are will pay for services, you all that provide those services. Once you accept that check as payment, it's cleared your account. You've already done the work. Now you're out the funds, and you have also done the work as well. So just being mindful of when you look at something, you get a check, make sure that you review it to say, okay, is there anything that seems odd about that? Okay. This is just another item where you have issued a regular check. People are able to wash your checks and make sure that you're using the correct type of printer ink. And then if you make signatures or you handwrite checks, make sure that you are using the correct ink on a pen. There are ways that people can wash checks. And so if you are writing checks, make sure that you're using a gel. I think it's 7 ink. And with a common, because if not, with a common household chemical with acetone in there, it could be washed. And the problem is that they are keeping your signature a lot of the times, and they're washing the payee and the amount. And what they'll do is they'll rewrite the check. It'll come through. It's your signature, but it's an altered item. And instead of a check made payable to $100, they've changed it now to $10,000. So make sure that you're using the right tool for the job, right equipment. I was talking with Lewis and Jacob this morning about the growing trend of fraud and the evolution of just technology. There are new pens out there that you can write your check out. If somebody hands you the pen, you're not going to notice it. However, it's erasable. And when they use this non-eraser, it's kind of like a plastic scrubber that they scrub the check, and they can change the amount, and you can't make it's hard to tell the difference between what was altered because it does such a good job of eliminating the ink. So just being mindful of when you are writing checks, make sure that you're using the correct pens. If you're printing checks, make sure you're using the right ink. Because those are some simple things that you can do to help reduce fraud. Okay. This is an example of check washing where the person you can see some of the residue behind. They're changing the name and the amounts, but yet it's the person's signature. So if it comes through the bank, we're going to look at it and say, okay, that's their signature. So you need to make sure that we are being mindful and you're using the right tool for the job. Okay, go ahead. This is just another example of a check that was washed. And they do a pretty good job. The acetone, when you dip it into dip the paper in, it does not leave a residue once it's dried, and then they rewrite it. So, it's out there and people are doing it, and it's not sophisticated. So unsolicited calls, email spoofing. Spoofing is the act of disguising communication from an unknown source or from a known source, unknown source, making it appear that it's a known or trusted source. This is something that's becoming more and more popular as far as fraud goes. And what the people are doing is that they are you'll get a call and say it's from the local police department, and it'll show up saying the Anchorage Police Department, the Alaska State Troopers. The number will appear. The person on the other end will have a conversation and say, hey, this is so-and-so from whatever organization it is. Maybe it's a business that you do services for. So they'll call your company. On the front end, by just looking at the caller ID, it appears that it's from a known trusted person. However, where you have to keep in mind does the ask make sense? What they're asking me for, does it make sense for what type of customer relationship I have? Now if somebody calls you and says that they're from the state troopers or whatever organization, evaluate, does it make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, you can always say, look, give me a few minutes. I have to do some research. I will call you back. Because if you disconnect that call and you call back the number and you hit redial, it's going to dial the actual number, not back to the suspect. So these are some of the things that people are doing. They're wanting to keep you on the phone. They don't want you to disconnect, because if you disconnect, then they've lost their connection with you. Law enforcement's never going to ask you for personal information. They're never going to ask you to make payments over the phone through Amazon gift cards. So evaluate it. They do high pressure tactics to try to get you on the line, to do things that when you have a moment to think, you realize that doesn't quite make sense. Go ahead. High pressure calls. The caller states that they need information immediately and threatens that you will lose money if you don't take immediate action. So again, these things are becoming more and more sophisticated. They want to keep you on the line. they threaten you for either incarceration. They threaten to say that, if you don't pay, a loved one's not going to get the medical care they need. We had a customer come into the branch, requesting to withdraw a large sum of money. The customer was on the phone and talking with the customer. It was, hey, look, I need to make withdrawal. I got, the police are on the line. They tell me that if I don't make this payment, I'm going to get arrested. And okay, well, what do they want you to do with the money? Okay, well, they want me to go get Amazon gift cards. Well, that doesn't quite make sense. And so we were talking with the person, and ultimately we called the local jurisdiction, and the dispatcher was like, look, that's a known scam. There's nothing out there for you. So again, taking that moment, if somebody threatens you with incarceration, somebody type of negative aspect, take that moment, evaluate it. You can always disconnect on the conversation politely and then recontact the organization at a known trusted number that you know to be true. Think before you act. Take the time before you request, make sure that the request makes sense. Again, keep in mind that the government agencies aren't going to ask you for your bank account, your social security number, or credit card information over the phone. Now, if you prompt a call to pay a bill, that's different, but they're not going to call you asking for that information. Outdated passwords. Fraudsters obtain a login information from data breaches. These data breaches can be purchased on the dark web through other type of account compromises. So when you are using passwords, choose complex passwords or passphrases. You don't want it so sophisticated that you're not going to be able to remember it, but you want to make sure it's complex. In order to help you with retention of the passwords, you can use password applications. These password applications are encrypted to where you only have to remember one complex password, and inside the application retains all your personal passwords for other accounts. And then latest, one of the things that's growing as a trend and where businesses are starting to use credit cards, banks, and even streaming devices are using dual authentication is a way to make sure that if somebody sends a request for a password reset, they have to get a code sent to your personal cell phone number to verify that you are the person that indeed requested that information. So if you have the option when you're setting up your accounts for personal accounts, make sure that you are utilizing the dual authentication aspect if they have it. Email compromises. Can you catch the altered item? And that's one of the things that the suspects are doing is they know at some point they have figured out what your email is. If they have the ability to change it, they will change it in all appearances that these two items look alike. However, if you closely look, you'll see that the difference is, if you go to the next slide, is that instead of using an L, they use a capital I. In all appearances, when you look at the email, it appears that it's going to be from the person that is a trusted person that you know. So keep these things in mind because you'll get requests for payment verifications or payment changes. Again, does the item make sense? We've heard stories where businesses here in Alaska have gotten emails saying, hey, look, we need to change the payment option. Instead of paying it to one address, we need to change it over to a different address. Does it make sense of where if you are paying a company in Alaska to do services, their billing has always been in Alaska. Now you're being asked to send a check, all future payments to a place in New York, to an apartment complex. Does that make sense? So just keep in mind does the email make sense based off of what you're seeing? So the next slides are just some of the various things that you might get asked for. Please regard this letter as authorization to debt the main operating account in the amount of $10,000 and send a cashier's check payable to this person. is that transaction make sense? Is that the type of normal banking options? When you get letters in, check to see, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? And if you get something suspicious, contact a direct number that you know to be trusted of that individual that would have requested that change, and get verification before you proceed. Go ahead, the next one. And again, this is just other examples of things that we've received as far as people wanting to make changes to accounts. Go to the next. And next. Okay, it all comes down to one question: how much are you willing to lose? It's not when your account's going to be compromised, whether it's through credit cards or through checks, but it's how much are you willing to lose, because ultimately at some point your business is going to fall victim to fraud. Okay, next. Does anybody have any questions reference what we've covered so far?
James, I'm going to jump in with some questions here that
Yeah.
we have just to get us started. Could you go over the type of ink or pen again that would help combat check washing?
Yeah, so you want to use a gel pen. I believe it's a ink 7. So it'll say gel with a 7. And the difference is that what happens is when you write the check, the ink actually gets embedded into the pigment of the paper versus just on the surface of the paper. And that makes it to where once it's embedded, it makes it not susceptible to acetone.
And another question here has to do with the password managers that you mentioned. Do you have a recommendation for maybe medium or small Alaska businesses, what password manager you'd recommend?
There are several of them out there, and what I would say, my recommendation is that you work with your IT department to see what's best for you and what fits with your organization and the type of business that you use. There are some that you can download through, app stores for your personal use, but ultimately the best course is making sure that you have a good IT department that can help you vet that, and make sure that it's going to do what you need it to do for the type of business that you conduct.
Thank you. So one more question during this process. We were asked if a business receives calls or emails that are fraud calls, how do you prevent these calls or emails from coming through? Are there any kind of stopgaps you can put in place to prevent those?
If your business is constantly getting phone calls or emails, again, if you have an ID department, they can block emails coming in. If the suspects change their email address, they're going to be able to send out, additional emails. But work with your ID department to see what type of filters that they can put on place. Again, don't open emails suspicious. Don't respond to them. And then as far as phone calls, depending on what type of phone system you use, you can work with your local provider to see if there's any way that they can block numbers, so that way they can prevent them from coming to your office.
Thank you very much. So that's all the questions we had come in for now. I do encourage everyone, if you have additional questions, use that question and answer feature if you're logged into Zoom, or please comment on Facebook and we'll get James to answer those at the end of the presentation. James, I'm going to start sharing the presentation again. We're going to go from there.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Go to the next slide. Okay, check fraud, ACH fraud, it's a race against time that begins once the check is presented at the bank or location where it's cashed. So as soon as you are aware, we as a bank financial institution have certain time parameters that we have in place to be able to return an item. So the quicker you can notify your local branch or treasury management to be able to notify them that there's fraudulent activity, the quicker we can act and the better chances that we have to help protect you and your organization from losing any type of money. So again, getting back to one of the best things that you have on your side that you can utilize is monitoring your account daily to check and see if there's any unusual activity. Again, we'll talk here in a little bit about some tools that can help you do that, take it away from a manual process that can help safeguard your funds as well. So active awareness, shift from reactive to active awareness in order to prevent check fraud, credit card, and online banking. Again, it's a race against time. As soon as you can detect it, the faster you can report it to us, the better off the chances are that we can prevent you from actually suffering a loss. So statistically, in 2022, the Anchorage or Fnba, we had identified 91 fraudulent items. That's up from 82 the previous year. And out of those 91, we prevented a loss of $2.5 million. And that's up from $500,000 the previous year. Since we started recording these events back in 2002, we have prevented over 2,000 fraudulent items and at a loss, prevented a loss of over $19 million. And those are, I mean, it's just on an increase and it's not slowing down. So prevention, are we doing enough effective to reduce the risk of posed by check fraud and ACH? That's a question you have to ask yourself. In order to help safeguard some of these things and to take it from a manual process to electronic process, the bank does offer several different products. One of them is Positive Pay, the other is ACH. If you're interested in these services, if you don't have them, I would encourage you to reach out to Treasury Management because they are a way to help mitigate your loss when it comes to fraud. So you never know what you might find in the trash. And these next few slides are going to be an example of why it's important that if you have information in your office, even at your home, that you shred confidential information, that you shred information that has bank accounts. You don't just throw it in the trash because you never know who's going to pick up your trash. So these next slides are from an actual case that happened in Anchorage. These are notes that the suspects had used. Again, they write out a thing. What do we need to do? We're not going to use PayPal. We need to create profiles, credit card profiles. We need bank accounts, new and existing, but they need to have a debit credit card attached to it. These are kind of like shopping lists. Once we have 3 or more different accounts, we can deposit clone corporate checks and wait the max 11 days, 80% chance of total clearing before being returned. So they're doing the statistics. They're writing out a plan to help them commit fraud. Go to the next one. Again, Capital One, MasterCard, Discover, different options of things that they can, different type of cards that they can apply for, create personal checks, getting routing numbers, check numbers. They're going to mirror a check number that they find in the trash. So if your check number is 3001, they might use 3001 or they're going to use 3011, whatever it is. They're going to want to make sure that the number is clear or as close as what is issued so it doesn't throw a red flag in your business. They're getting names, dates, date of birth, social security numbers, phone numbers, They are apply for, hey, I need to apply for a Walmart credit card, US Bank, Best Buy card. What are the things that they're going to apply for based off of the information they obtained? Now, you might ask yourself, where are they getting this information? They are getting it. Go ahead to the next slide, Jacob. Uh, Again, mother's maiden name, ancestry, Google, ID card numbers, previous things, job employments. All this stuff can be found readily available on the internet. Go ahead to the next. They're getting it from ancestry.com, Google, social media platforms, and they're looking for maiden names, previous addresses, and again, job and employment history. All those things are readily available online that they can research to help defeat, some of those security questions. How often do we get in front? How do we get in front of fraud? It's ongoing security awareness programs, being educated, seeking out the best practices, talking with people who are subject experts is one of the best ways. Stronger passwords, using dual authentication, understanding the threats, and respond to these things in real time. Try to be proactive versus reactive. Make sure employees are trained properly. Spending time up front will save you time on the back end. And again, use the fraud prevention tools we have offered, positive pay and ACH filters. Again, I would encourage you, if you're not using these tools, to contact our treasury management, and they would be able to assist you, because I would tell you that this year alone, fraud has increased tremendously. And it's not only a lot of these things that we're seeing are losses on the customer side of the house, and some of these things could have been easily prevented by using the tools that are outlined here. Know your risk. Ways confidential information can be compromised: email, USB drives, using unsecured networks, downstream. So sometimes the vendors that you use or suppliers can be penetrate or be compromised. Files and reports left on desk, incoming and outgoing mail, and information thrown in the trash. Again, if it's information that has accounts, businesses, make sure that you're shredding that information versus just throwing it out in the garbage. Protect yourself, train your employees, use dual control. If you're counting money at the end of the day, you're processing things, is there areas where it's best to have two people versus one person? Use a standalone computer for banking. Never connect to an unknown Wi-Fi. Know what fraud trends are in your area, and have a good IT person, and keep in touch and have a good relationship with your local banker. Okay, so this is something that, again, we are in Alaska. Sometimes we think that we are not susceptible to trends that are in the lower 48. This is an ATM skimmer. What the people can do, different variances. There's a hanging brochure with a camera. They mount on the ATM. Once you enter in your card, it captures your magnetic strip. The camera captures your PIN number. Go to the next one. You have skimmers that go on top overlay of other machines. And again, kind of serves the same purpose. Once you slide your card in, is reading that magnetic strip. I will let you all know, we inspect our ATMs to look for these type of things on a daily basis. But just be mindful when you're out, not only using ATM machines, but anywhere that you put your debit card into can be susceptible. Okay, go to the next. And then you have pin pad layovers, where it's just a pin and it's recording the information that you're typing in to some type of remote storage device, and then later they're using that information to reproduce cards. Go to the next one. again, talking about the fact is that things do happen here in Alaska. This is a federal or a press release from the District of Alaska talking about a gentleman, Marcus Russo, who is 40 years old. And when I was with the Alaska State Troopers, I helped investigate part of this case. And what the gentleman was doing is he was using these skimmers on ATMs to record the information, encode it, and transfer the information to magnetic strips. And he was compromising accounts down in the lower 48. However, he was flying up to Alaska to withdraw money. And he was ultimately caught. Go ahead to the next. This is one of the stacks of cards that were intercepted. On each one of these cards is personal banking information, ATM information, and on the back side of the card is the 4-digit code that he was able to obtain to withdraw money out. And the next slide is just some more of these cards that were actually intercepted. And if you can imagine, how many cards there are in that bag and how much money potentially could have been, additional money could have been lost if it hadn't have been for us getting wind of this case and figuring out who he was. Solutions to help in the race. There's Positive Pay. It transmits a file of issued checks to the bank on a daily basis, and it verification of the check payee, the dollar amount, and the check. If there's anything that's off between those three areas, it will send you an alert. And then also there's ACH fraud prevention, text or email alerts from unapproved ACH debits trying to clear, and quickly make pay return decisions on any ACH debits. These are products that we do offer that can help reduce the fact that your accounts are compromised. I'm talking with some of our customers and the amount of time that they spend dealing with trying to clean up the mess after their accounts have been compromised and checks have started clearing. The amount of time that they're spending on the front end trying to deal with that is minimum to the amount of time that these products take to utilize. Good. So here's some of the testimonials. Imaging associate uses fraud services, Fnba, to remove any chances of fraudulent checks being cashed. Positive Pay provides security we need for the company and our patients. Again, these are testimonials from our businesses that are utilizing the services. Our account information was stolen, replicated, and printed on checks that cleared the account with copied signatures. In the process of reporting the fraud and looking for solutions to prevent it happening again, First National offered Positive Pay. Now we get a call or email regarding any checks that haven't been listed or issued, and that's from the Brother Francis Shelter in Kodiak. And then ACH, fraud prevention, and Positive Pay are very helpful. It gives me the peace of mind knowing that fraudulent checks are not being negotiated and that payments that are being withdrawn are approved entities only. This just adds one extra layer of security, and that's from North Surgery and Surgical. Again, these services that we offer, there are talk with Treasury Management, there are fees, but the ultimate fees reference what the potential savings is and the headaches that come about dealing with fraud on your account, are minimal. It's our time, your time is all worth something. Fraud can create havoc on your accounts. It can take up a lot of time as well. There are solutions out there. I would encourage you to talk to make sure that you're utilizing things that will help best protect your businesses. That would be my recommendation. Okay, go ahead, next. Any questions?
James, I'm going to give you one question here from our Q&A. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Is there a security benefit to using the chip scanner at a point of sale device versus inserting your credit card into the machine, even if you have a chip?
Um, you know, chips. If you have a card with a chip and you're using a machine that's chip enabled, it is more secure and not as susceptible to being copied over as a magnetic strip. So there are advantages to, again, using the machines that are chip enabled, that once you insert your machine or your card into the machine, it locks it for a few seconds and reads the information off the chip, not the magnetic strip. Uh, so there are some safety aspects of that.
Thank you. And I think you probably already answered this one, but in looking at ATM skimmers and these other devices that potentially read your cards, is it something that a consumer business should be looking for on a daily basis? I think you mentioned that we check on a daily basis, but what should they be looking for when they get to those machines?
You know, whenever I personally go to use a machine, I just kind of take a cursory look on the machine to say, hey, does anything seem a little bit odd? A lot of times we go through our day-to-day life and we're just so normal. We're so used to doing things in a certain way. But now with the sophistication of what people are doing and take a moment, look at it. There's actually the contactless paying where you take your card, you set it onto the tap it onto the device. That's one way to prevent having your card information compromised. Um, but if you have ATMs, you use them in your business, your kiosk, I would just tell you that you should inspect to make sure, hey, is there anything that's been added to these devices? And it's just a quick cursory look over. You don't have to like take it apart or anything like that, but definitely take a look at them.
Thank you. Okay, we have two more questions. Thank you, everyone who has submitted. If you do want to get a last minute question is, please put it now in as we come to a close here. So the first of those two is, I use a wallet with RFID to hold my debit credit cards. Is that enough?
Yes, and so for those who aren't familiar with what RFD is so just like, I don't know if it picks up like these, it's makes it aware if somebody tries to use a card reader, kind of like the contactless payment system. If they get close enough to your wallet or to your card, in essence, it could trigger a transaction. So having it into either some type of wallet that has that protection, it's an extra layer of security for yourself.
Okay, and last question here. This is a great question. As an Alaska business, what fraud trends should I be most concerned about in the months and years to come?
So one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now, there's a couple of things that I'm seeing as far as in my unit and talking with other people and other financial institutions. Check fraud is growing tremendously. And last weekend I was reading an article and there was a little video clip in the article and it talked about a gentleman said that, hey, I sent out payments, and all of a sudden I got notice that my payments hadn't been received. I sent them out to the gas company, to the power company, and I got notice that I was delinquent on my payment. I went in and looked at my account and I noticed that the checks had cleared. However, instead of being written for $100, they're for $1,000. I went to my local bank. I had them pull the copies of the checks, and the front of the checks were still made payable to the gas companies. However, on the back, they were signed by somebody, uh, not associated with the business. So, being as proactive as you can and monitoring your account, hands down, is one of the best things that you guys can do. Um, check fraud is growing. I don't see it stopping. And the other thing too is email, requests through emails. You get an email asking for payment change. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, again, pick up the phone, call the vendor, and have a conversation. Hey, did you send this? Is this where you're wanting to send payment? Because if you all send out the check and you send it to the wrong address, you're opening yourself up to potential loss that way as well.
Thank you very much, James. Before we close out, any closing comments? That was the end of our questions. I will thank you everyone for joining us today and obtaining some of this valuable information from our First National Security Manager, James Estes. Thank you, James, for providing that.
Thank you.
I want to let everyone know that up on your screen is our URL where we're going to post a recording of this webinar. In case you can't see it or you're listening, fnbalaska.com/webinar. And if you give us a couple days, we're going to post a copy of this recording. And there's also information on our upcoming webinar series that we'll be posting on that page. So thank you again. We very much appreciate your participation, all the thoughtful questions, and have a great day. Thank you again, James. See you, everybody.
Thanks.